Orbital Gardens, this is Mission Control. We are confirming acquisition of your signal. You are live in 5, 4, 3, 2...
Hello and welcome to episode 20 of Gardeners of the Galaxy, the podcast for all of the sentient beings in the universe who have a passion for plants. I am Emma the Space Gardener and I will be your host as we explore gardening on Earth and beyond. Humans have been cultivating wine grapes for at least 8,000 years. However, if you're a wine drinker, then you probably know that vines are at risk from climate change, as they are very sensitive to changes in temperature. In this episode, I'm talking to Nicolas Gaume and Dr. Michael Lebert from Space Cargo Unlimited, who are using space missions to develop vines for a warmer future. One of the things that can really help a podcast grow is getting positive reviews from its listeners. If you listen to podcasts through an app, then it may well have a rating or review system that you can use to show your appreciation. For Gardeners of the Galaxy, you can also leave reviews on the Podbean homepage or my website, theunconventionalgardener.com. I also use the Podchaser website, which allows you to find new shows and bookmark episodes, follow creators, leave reviews, and be part of the podcasting community. During April 2021, Podchaser is donating 25 cents to Meals on Wheels America's Go Further Fund for every podcast and episode review left, and they'll double the donation if the podcaster replies, so it seems like the perfect time to sign up, find your favourite shows, and leave them a review. In November 2019, Space Cargo Unlimited sent a case of wine from Bordeaux to the International Space Station. It spent just over a year aging in microgravity before coming back down to Earth earlier this year. Their Alpha mission sent vine cells on a suborbital flight on Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket in December 2019. Then, in March 2020, the Canes mission launched 320 vine cuttings to the ISS to see how they would react to life in space. These were the first 3 experiments of Mission WISE, a comprehensive research program investigating the effects of space on vines and wines to develop innovative solutions to agricultural problems here on Earth. I'm thrilled to have CEO and co-founder Nicolas Gaume and Scientific Director Dr. Michael Lebert on the show to talk about Mission WISE and its first results. Hello, Nicholas. Hello, Michael. Welcome to Gardeners of the Galaxy. You're here today to talk about your very exciting mission. But, Nicholas, if we can start with you. You're co-founder and CEO of Space Cargo Unlimited. Why did you decide to start a space company, and what does your company do? What are your goals?
So, hello, Emma. I've been a tech entrepreneur all my life, and I started as a teenager enjoying video games, and first company was a game company when game wasn't as big of a entertainment experience it is today. Getting older, you want to make a difference. Getting older, you want to use what you learn to hopefully help others and to a large degree our human community. And in all fairness, I've been always extremely inspired by the topic of agriculture. I actually grew up with most of the family on my mother's side was in agricultural, so growing plants. My dad was a chef, so I guess the end production to see what it is you do when you want to feed humanity. And certainly, like many of us, I hope all of us, I'm growing concerns about the future of humanity on our planet because of what we've done to our planet. And certainly starting a journey where I changed my habits, relearn how to behave in the way I consume, live really, as I believe we should all. I also realized we needed to find maybe more impactful solutions. It happens that I've always been convinced that when rooted in good, strong values, science is a fact of progress. And I think that so I'm a believer in science and progress, and I'm a believer that humanity can do good. Now, it is true also it can do bad, but it's down to us to decide which way we're going to go. And really, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all these billionaires that are passionate about space got us thinking with Emmanuel that maybe there was something else to do than escape the planet. Because when you look at what they want to do, is they want to go to Mars, they want to live in space. And Emmanuel and I really were discussing, there's only one planet and maybe there will be others we find where to live. But in all fairness, this is crazy. The amount of energy to find another planet is disproportionate to the one that it would require all of us to be conscious and take actions for the future of our own. So anyway, which, by the way, doesn't mean I'm not excited about going to the moon or Mars. It's just a matter of balance and perspective. So just there's no misunderstanding. Yeah. Anyway, by the fact that we saw that there were more and more options to go to space at a more affordable price, we thought that maybe, as Europeans also, we would never compete in building a full spacecraft, but maybe we could do best use of these and maybe try to think of what it is we could leverage from this infrastructure that was being built to really do something useful for humanity and for the planet. And certainly that got us to look into all the research done on the International Space Station. And we realized there was a vast amount of amazing discoveries, and that really inspired us as much as a lot of best science. And maybe there was lacking practical outcomes in a way that we thought as entrepreneurs, accustomed to tech entrepreneurship, where we try to think about what would be new usage you can forge out of innovation. And we felt that, by kind of creating a platform, an infrastructure where we could actually better access to space, we could unleash so many high-level potential. It's a long intro, and I apologize, Emma, but what I'm reaching out is that was really a journey between, one, our appetite to leverage space for Earth, which was really from the day one the goal of this company, and two, us thinking that maybe the best area of focus would be agriculture. Yeah. And with that, we were fortunate to meet, and as any story, it's, the people you meet. So we were very fortunate to meet a gentleman named Achim Schwarzfelder, who is today our head of space operation, was working in a big aerospace company at the time, and he was very passionate and amazing leader. And we got all of the three of us to think more and do more. And eventually we met Michael, and it was like one step further into deep diving into the immense opportunity of space for Earth. And here we are.
Brilliant.
So really, practically speaking, we built this first comprehensive project leveraging space for Earth on the future of agriculture. We chose viticulture, and I can get back to why viticulture. But we feel that the space environment is a unique environment that can bring us many exciting insights and key opportunities for the future of agriculture on Earth and for humanity's future.
Excellent. So you mentioned there that you're focusing at the moment on viticulture. So can you tell us why wine and vines are what you're focusing on now?
For three reasons. First, viticulture is like the canary in the coal mine. When it comes to climate change, vine plants are super sensitive. So the way they react to climate evolution is really extremely sensitive. And there are a lot of science, way too many. One that I often used in talking to people interested in our work is the level of alcohol in wine. You take a chateau in Bordeaux area, you get in the 70s, you would get 11 degrees of alcohol in a wine bottle. The same chateau today, 14 degrees of alcohol. Yeah. Tomorrow, can't do wine anymore in Bordeaux. And it's really because mainly the grapes get more sugary, and that's creating more of the fermentation, alcoholic preferences, more alcohol. So it's kind of extremely telling, and there's so many others when you look at the disease, some of the way the vine plants evolve. So there's definitely a very visible signs of this. Second, nevertheless, wine is probably a more, let's say, higher value in sense of more money involved than other agricultural segments. And that means specifically that there's more research being dedicated to wine and vine. They're better pay salary for scientific teams. They're more infrastructure. And really, choosing this particular area, wine and vine, we could access an amazing and a vast amount of expertise and leadership, science leadership, that could give us some solution and that we knew we could then leverage for other opportunities and products. So, it was at the second. The third one is, we also felt there was some merits being from Bordeaux and being French to start on wine. We do like drinking wine, but, it's also interesting to know that the father of enology, I don't know if I pronounce it properly, but the science of wine analysis, and certainly one of the father with Robert Koch of modern life science is Louis Pasteur. And he really found some major discovery on particularly bacteria that led his work on vaccination out of 8 years of study of wine. So, it was also an inspiration to work on his footstep.
Excellent. That's really great. So before we start talking about the vines, one of the first steps you had in Mission Wise was to send 12 bottles of wine to the International Space Station. And they were there for over a year, and you have just brought them back down to Earth and had the wine tasting. Can you tell me what differences you found between the bottles that had been into space and the ones that stayed on Earth? And were you surprised by the results?
So, first of all, there were a difference, and there were two great wines. And I'd be happy to tell you more about my own perception, but I'll be very honest. This is a research program, and we're just starting the process. So, we still have a lot of work to do to appreciate the differences and the reason of the differences. I would just want to say that wine is still a mystery. We probably understand only quarter of what's happening in the wine aging process. And particularly older wines, we have no residual sugar in the wine, are still continuing to evolve, whereas technically you wouldn't know why, because there's no reason why. So it's still a very fascinating process with very key components, like bacteria, we said yeast, and some more very interesting one like polyphenols. And in all fairness, when you look at a multi-component biological system, it's a very complex a process when you remove, going back to the roots of the project, gravity in its specific environment. And I let Michael speak much more of this because I'm humbled by Michael's knowledge. But what I want to say is that one of the key things we're trying to capture in everything we do is how the absence of gravity kind of triggers some interesting evolution. And I will let Michael tell you more about this. But truth is, when we affect the absence of gravity to a complex multi-component biological system like a human body, things happen. We had this amazing experiment called Twins in Space, where Scott Kelly, an astronaut, 50-year-old, had a twin brother who stayed on Earth. And when he came back after a year on the space station, he was technically no longer the twin brother of his brother. And so, but it's hard to really understand all the details of why. Yeah. A wine bottle is much simpler to analyze. And that's really why the reason we took this. And going back to my previous point, it's also, again, a study material that got Louis Pasteur to find so many major discoveries. So we thought it was interesting to start there. Now, we are French, so besides having a bit to look into future of agriculture and food, we also care about taste. And taste is something extremely subtle. Different, and that has both very chemical reason, but also there's some cognitive and some more even spiritual connections to the taste. So, and wine has become an art form in that regard. So the way we did the tasting with these 12 different people, half of them roughly were experts in wine tasting, the other half were amateurs. And we really looked into first the differences, not necessarily what qualified the wine in itself, but how different it was. And so color got a little more brick color than the earth wine. On the smelling, we don't say smelling, but smelling the wine, there was not so many differences, to be honest. And tasting the wine, most of the tasters, and they had their own vocabulary, and they were saying, finding a little more fruity, like soft and fruity. So that was my case. And it was extremely moving to see two great ones and different ones, honestly, after all these years, because we were really completely unable to expect. I mean, some of us felt, I guess, had fear that we had like some vinegar or some kind or whatever.
Yeah.
It was really...
Okay, so that is a really exciting experiment, and I know that's ongoing. But if we can move on to Michael for a minute and talk about the next aspects of Mission Wise, are actually looking at taking the vines themselves into space. So, Michael, can you tell us about the first plant experiment that you launched, which was called Alpha? Yes.
So Alpha was essentially performed with calluses, which is undefined plant material, for the simple reason that it's much easier to handle. And we sent them for a couple of minutes by a ballistic rocket up to the outer stratosphere and got them back and got the data back. And the idea was, or the background of that was, is it really what we think is happening, that the exchange between the outside medium and the callus for chemical substances, like, for example, nitrogen components, phosphorus, and so on, is changing and limiting, and the oxygen content is changing during the weightlessness period. And we got the data back, and it essentially showed what we expected. But we were kind of a little bit of disappointed. It was only a very short period of time where we had weightlessness, and we have a lot of disturbances in there, a lot of vibrations. And so we were kind of expecting much better grade of microgravity. So if you have a lot of bumps in there, you don't see what you really want to see. So that was a little bit disappointing. Anyway, the final outcome was that what we expected was really happening. And so the major point what Nicola was telling you about the wine was the background idea is that convection is necessary for the oxygen distribution in the wine bottles as well as for the catalysis. So that's the connection between the two experiments.
Okay.
And in microgravity, you do not have any convection. So you have a very limited distribution of oxygen. And so at places where you normally have enough oxygen or less oxygen, you have now a lot of oxygen or less oxygen. So you should expect that the chemical processes leading to the aging of the wine are kind of changed.
Yeah.
Not disturbed, because it's a negative implication. It's not, it's simply changed. So we should see changes in taste and the structure of the wine. So the colloid structure should change, all these kind of stuff. That's still something which is coming up in the analysis. The wine is right now at ISVV, the Wine Institute of the University of Bordeaux, under the direction of Philippe Daillet, who's doing the main experiments over there. And they are analyzing right now what are the chemical differences between the ground control and the flight experiment bottles.
Okay, that's great. So it wasn't particularly long after that you launched a second experiment, which was called Cane. So that was about this time last year. And you sent 320, what I would call vine cuttings, I think you have a different word, but little segments of vine to the International Space Station, and they stayed there for 6 months. So can you tell us about that experiment, please?
Me or Nicolas? Go ahead. So I can tell what we did. We sent 320. Yes, you can see the wood part, which is and we actually got half Merlot, half Cabernet Sauvignon, because they are the main vines from the border area. But I'll let Michael explain how we stored them and what happened to them.
Yeah.
So the whole idea was that we have in the stem cuttings, which include a part wood and at least one bud. So something which is growing out later on the next spring. And we had those 320 of those exposed to microgravity and to the increased level of radiation. And they are kind of in a dormancy state. But anyhow, the changes were perceived, are still perceived by the cells, and there's a memory effect, and there's also the radiation effect, which leads to mutations, which then lead to different behavior of the cuttings. We were very anxious when we got them back. That was January this year, and they were over there. I believe it's much more than half a year. It's essentially almost 9 months, because we were delayed in getting them back. Okay. And we were totally surprised when we saw suddenly that all of them survived at this stage. I mean, we expected 50 to 60% survivors. This is normal. It is absolutely normal when you do these kind of experiments.
Michael is an amazing researcher, science leader and science lover, and he worked on so many experiments on the International Space Station. Before, when we started working together, Michael, you just had sent tomatoes into it.
Right.
So I just want to underline that it was something you were quite familiar with, but we're surprised by the number of survivals
this
among
is
our
really
our
amazing. Everything survived. And then we planted them. And what we then realized, something we were totally surprised by the fact that they were growing very fast, much, much faster than controls. They were forming fluorescence, so they were blooming. And so as if they had an advanced developmental speed. Now, this is the state we are right now in there. So the major difference is now the developmental speed, which is different. What we are looking in now is what kind of substances in there. So, for example, the polyphenols, the tannins, terpenoids, this kind of stuff, which is essentially defining then the taste of the wine later on in the grapes. We will analyzing that, and we are just now in the process of trying to isolate canes which have an increased insensitivity or resistance for stuff like downy mildew, for powdery mildew, and for phylloxera. In German, it's called Reblaus. I don't know what the English word is.
Phylloxera, I think I would recognize as a vine disease that nearly wiped out vines. Yeah.
Essentially, because if you would get a higher resistance of these plants, we would finally have some European wine without American roots anymore. Not nationalism, but it would be very interesting to see how the taste and the structure of the wine would change if they are the real wine.
Okay. So, I mean, you say that they're growing very fast and that they're already starting to flower. But, I mean, these must still be very small vines.
It's amazing. I mean, it's really, you have one or two leaf and you see the pest control, same age, same plant at the beginning, the same plant, twins. And they're like 8, 9, 10, and they're like all big and they have all roots all over. It's fascinating.
They are so let's say 20, 25 centimeters in contrast to 2 or 5 centimeters.
Okay. How long would it normally take for a vine to go from a little cutting into a vine that produces grapes?
Normally, I believe it takes about 3 to 4 years.
Right.
So we expect these ones to do that in 1 to 2 years. So, which we'll see in the future, but right now it looks like they are much faster.
Okay, so still with you, Michael. What are we hoping to learn from the canes experiment, and what implications does that have for agriculture on Earth?
I have to step back for that for a second, because I'm a traditionally trained physiologist. That was my background. I did my PhD in biochemistry and did my postdoc for molecular biology. So I'm almost a complete biologist, knowing all the techniques and all this stuff. What I was always disturbed with is that we have the tendency in the biology field to subdivide the findings and the specialities and the ideas in even so smaller pieces.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what I was always wondering, there must be a way to have the full picture, to connect all the dots which we have, which was impossible in many cases because the sheer amount of data was kind of killing us.
Yeah.
Now, when you step back a little bit, you look suddenly at a field of biology which is kind of strange, and a lot of people are talking about it, but only very few people have a good idea what's happening. That's called evolution.
Yeah.
It's a natural way of changing stuff to get in the position to handle new problems, new changes, for example, climate change.
Yeah.
How is evolution working? And I don't want to go into too much detail. I don't want to bore you. It's mutation and it's selection. That's essentially. But the major point is what we learned the last couple of years is that it's not taking so much time as we normally expect. It's not 1 million years. It's not 10 million years. It can even happening in months or a year. So that gives us suddenly the access using evolution to guide our organisms, for example, the wine, in the direction of where we want to go. For example, increased salt tolerance, which is a problem if you have not enough water.
Yeah.
Drought tolerance against too much sun, which cause plants as well as we can get sunburns, for example. All these kind of ideas we are popping around right now, and using essentially evolution itself as a process to guide our organisms to go in the right direction we want to have. And that's what we want to learn from the Keynes experiment. Is that really true? Can we really see that? And we know others already have done these kind of experiments in another angle. So, for example, the Chinese were sending up seeds and exposed them for half a year and for a year, even some rice seeds were exposed for rice plants, were exposed for only a couple of weeks. And they came back and they saw all kind of changes. And these seeds gave rise to varieties which are already planted on big scale in China and sold all over the place. So there is something in it. So microgravity in combination with radiation seems to be a trigger which helps plants develop in the direction we want to go. Now, microgravity is essentially only stress.
Yeah.
And a lot of the responses we see at molecular level are simply stress responses. But on the other hand, stress is also guiding evolution to get organisms which are better adapted. Now, in many cases, the stress the plants see already have been seen before. So more light, more higher temperature, lower temperature, more water, less water, and so on. But they never, ever have seen the stress of microgravity.
Yeah.
Removal of gravity, because that was always constant during the development in the evolution of the plants.
That's basis of everything we do. It's like life for 4.2 billion years has always had gravity as a constant, whereas all the other parameters of life have changed drastically all throughout these 4.2 billion years. So when you move gravity, you create that stress Mike was referring to, and it's really that what is the main core engine of the evolutions we're looking into.
Okay.
And it turns out evolution speeds up in the moment when the stress becomes crazy. For example, animals and plants which are living in towns or in big cities, for example, they develop much, much faster than the evolutionary speed is much higher than under normal conditions for the surrounding villages, for example. So animals learning how to read the traffic lights, not to be run over by cars. So that's one example which I think is very surprising.
Add to this, Emma, because we are, we really just want to say, I think complementary to what Michael said, we really want to be able to push the boundary of knowledge and find options. So everything we're going to find, we'll publish, so we'll share discovery knowledge. Now, as for the plants themselves, we brought back, if we made sure we found naturally, and I insist naturally, organically, more resistant plants to all these evolutions related to climate change that we are trying to look into, then that actually means that we will be in a position to offer and sell as a business these plants to wineries. And, that is the combination of we want to be able to discover and share as vastly as possible and hopefully find ways to get a return so we can continue to fund the research. So, if any of your listeners wonder why we do this, how we do this, and what's the construct between discovering more, hopefully for nurturing better science, and two, how we can fund the entire thing. That's the way we do it.
Absolutely. Somebody has to pay for it.
May I add one more piece of at least my personal opinion? The problem is many people might think, okay, why don't you use gene technology, which is very easy to apply and so on. The normal gene technology we are using is changing one piece and then looks what's happening and then change the next piece and look what's going to happen. So it's essentially what you're doing is just imagine you're driving a car and you want to go to the left. There's two possibilities to do this, right? First of all, you can shoot your left tire and you go to the left, right?
Okay. Or
you can use the steering wheel, right? Which is what evolution is doing. It's using the steering wheel. And we are shooting our left or right tire. We have a lot of side effects which we cannot control and have not a good idea what's happening there. And that's the difference. And you remember that contrast to many other countries, at least in Europe, gene technology restrictions are very strict. So that's another thing. And we think we as scientists have also kind of responsibility to do it as much natural as it's possible.
Okay.
So putting plants in space is really interesting enough, and at least that's our core belief, a way to let nature shows us what's the evolution. Because if you look at the way we hammered Earth, evolution will make these plants evolve, but it will take time, and we as a humanity will suffer the consequence. You can say, well, it's our fault. I tend to believe that we should all behave responsibly, change the way we behave to prevent things getting to us, and then find solutions that nevertheless are respectful of our balance of our life and of nature. And that's really what Michael and I and Emmanuel and all the team strongly believe. We want to make sure we let the nature tell us where to go and what to do to find options.
That's a really, really fascinating ethos. So I know that there are 3 more experiments planned for Mission-Wise. So I don't know who wants to take this one, but can you tell us what's coming up?
I really want to say, we're still working on defining these. Each of the experiments brings knowledge that nurtures the next. So to be completely transparent, we can share some of the hopes of interest we have, and Michael will do this in a second. But we really want to make sure we have time to learn from what we've done.
Yeah.
And so most of this year, we're going to have a lot of work analyzing the plants we brought mainly, the wine also. As I said, we'll publish all our outcomes and results, but we'll also refine what is next. Now, the spirit was to do anything from vine to wine. I mean, it was going to the entire spectrum. That was the intent of Mission-Wise to begin with, to be able to have everything from the plant to the actual part of it, and understanding throughout all the various stages and steps more about the plants themselves, about the processes that we can leverage some of the interesting compounds. I think mentioned polyphenol and others, and so that we'll continue to do so. So, for instance, fermentation. In fermentation, we have a lot of things to learn about. Fermentation is critical to making wine, but it's also critical to making bread and pasta and so many other food products, and certainly, obviously, also super critical to pharma to create medicines. So that is certainly one. Doing fermentation in space is something extremely interesting. But Michael, please take it away on giving more thoughts on our 4th experiment and what we're looking into.
Yeah, and we should also consider that we have to redo or want to redo one of the experiments, for example, canes, a second or even a third time to have a more solid basis before we step forward. Can we emphasize the fermentation approach of what Nicolas was saying? So the next step would be we have now the grapes. And what's happening now is now we need yeast, and especially for red wine, we also need some bacteria which are doing stuff in there. And this is now an interesting question. When I talked to a friend of mine, Jacob Cohen, he's the lead scientist of NASA Ames, and he told me when you look at this wine, this is a very specialized plant system or organism. When you look at yeast, it's a very general organism. Yeah. So the chances to see changes which are going in the direction you want to go, or in bacteria, are much, much higher in that generalist because they have a much easier way of changing their direction than wine, for example, has. That doesn't exclude wine from our experiments, but this is very, very much that I'm looking forward to doing these kind of experiments because now we look for what's happening to yeast exposed to microgravity, what is happening to the bacteria which are smoothing the red wine. So they are changing some of the chemical substances to give the interesting taste of the red wine. Now, and what's happening if you do this together? Because in nature, nothing happens isolated.
Yeah.
We always have a combination of all kind of stuff. And that's for this kind of experiment. And then we go even a step further and go back and close the circle. And now you look for wine plants or for plants and their interaction with their internal microbiome. You remember that we have a lot of bacteria in humans. We have them in our guts, and we learn every day more how important these bacteria and the happenings are very much influencing how good our health is. Yeah. It's the same for plants. So we look for the internal microbiome and the external microbiome and the interaction between the plant and the external microbiome. And this is really, we are so much looking forward for that. We are teaming up with experts like Sharon Doty at the University of Washington in Seattle to do these kind of experiments. And this will become this really quantum leap of what we are thinking what we can do.
So I have a question for you, Michael.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Obviously now we're entering the era of commercial spaceflight. It's easier to rerun experiments there. But we're getting to the point where maybe the scientists get to go into space with the experiment. So would you like to go into space with one of your experiments? No.
No. Nicola really wants to go, I know, and I give it away now, but I don't want to go. I mean, everything I know about ISS, for example, is kind of, I'm very clear about this. No, I don't want to go in a smelly environment which is very loud, and you really have a problem to go to the toilet. So
I'm with you there. It sounds too much like camping to me.
Yeah, but camping is luxurious against what they have up there. No. What I like to do is, and that this might come as a surprise, but I think the most problems we have in doing the experiments up there are the astronauts. They have so much to do. They are so under stress that a lot of things happening which shouldn't happen. Now, so what our idea is essentially that we have automatic systems which do it again and again, and it's absolutely the same way.
Yeah.
So my short answer on the bottom line is no, never.
But you want to go, Nicola? No.
No. You move.
I do actually. I do. I mean, again, I do because one thing I want to experiment is the overview effect. It's been well documented.
Oh, yes.
Is this ability to see Earth from above that I believe has been transformational to many astronauts to really admire space as a tiny little blue dot in the middle of a vacuum of space, and it gives you even further love of the planet. Honestly, I want to experiment that. I want to see that view. But yeah, I appreciate the practicality of, as of now, extremely demanding. But looking at what SpaceX, Blue Origin, and so many other companies are working on, you may expect it will be a different experience in years to come. And in all fairness, I've actually co-founded a company named Orbit with my partner Jason Andrews to actually train the next gen of commercial astronauts, of space tourists.
Right.
So I'm very eager to continue to do this and experiment myself.
Okay, so looking into the future, where we are a multi-planetary species, if there was a colony on the moon or Mars and you got to go and you could take one plant in your luggage, what would you choose, Nicola?
So I've been thinking about this. So you obviously could choose an ornament plant, something looking good, but I really wanted something practical. And I decided to go for lens. Lens, is it the English term? I was trying to think how you call them in English. The plant, the lens that produce the lentils.
Ah, yes. No, we just call them lentils. Yeah.
Lentils. Okay. I thought the plant as the lentils is actually the seeds, right? But anyway, I liked it because I like permaculture. And certainly when you start growing plants, it's taking the nitrogen from the atmosphere down into the soil, and it gets you the ground for growing other things.
Yeah.
The lentils, so the seed, I love to eat, and they are fairly easy to store. So I thought, if I was to start a new life on a new planet, that I would go for the lentils. Yes.
Well, they do pair very nicely with wine, so I think you've got a good choice there.
Totally fair.
And so, Michael, if we forced you to go into space to this colony, what plant would you take with you?
What I would take, I figured that a lot of people would bring some practical stuff, right? They are going to share that anyway. So I could bring something beautiful because I'm breeding in my garden peonies. I would bring a peony.
Lovely.
And if I would be allowed to bring some animals, I would bring some bees for fertilization, and because that helps a lot.
Okay, so are we going to have space honey from your peonies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
We're going to make you come then now. Excellent.
That's great.
So that's great. You can definitely both join my colony then, because we'll have wine, we'll have lentils, we'll have peonies, and we'll have bees. It'll be the world's most beautiful place. Sorry, the off-world's most beautiful place.
Yes.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Perfect.
Okay, well, it sounds like you have a very exciting few years ahead of you. So hopefully you will come back on the show in a couple of years' time and tell us some more of the results and about what has gone on in between. So thank you both very much for taking the time to come and speak to us today.
Thank you so much, Emma. Wonderful.
It was so much fun.
Thank you so much for having us, Emma.
It's been brilliant. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Did you know that Helen Sharman was not only the first Briton in space, but the first woman to visit the Mir space station? Her Project Juno mission was nearly 30 years ago, and in the next episode I'll be looking into Helen's space gardening experiments. Subscribe to the show now so you don't miss it. You can subscribe via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts and YouTube, and there are links in the show notes for you. I'd love to hear your comments on the show. You can comment on the Podbean homepage, on my website, on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram, or email me, and the address for that is earth@spacebotany.uk. That's it for this episode. You'll find the show notes on my website at theunconventionalgardener.com, which is also home to a virtual tip jar for those of you who would like to support the show. If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to tell a friend. Let's grow our Space Gardener community. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Orbital Gardens, this is Mission Control, confirming termination of your signal. We have spoken to the engineering team about the smell you've reported, and they have requested that you try stirring the WC tank. Mission Control out.